So if you watch my interview, I know long, it was an hour long, but it was a great interview, and I was truly lucky to have Herbert George to interview. No one in my family has really breached the 65-year-old threshold, so I had to look somewhere else, and that would be my girlfriend's father, Herbert, who is 76 now, I believe. And he was really open when I first met him. That was actually only the second time I had met him. And so I knew from the stories that I heard from the past and that he would be able to really remember things in his life. He hasn't really forgotten. His mind is like a steel trap. He remembers a lot of things with great detail. And it's amazing his ability to remember names and faces and see people. As he saw in the interview, he saw Ray, even though that was years and years ago. He just saw him recently and still remembered him, remembered his name. He truly appreciates the connection he makes with other people. And one of the things that I kind of saw was with Steve, his best friend, as you heard about, and they were best friends since elementary school. And they got in a fight and became friends afterwards, and Steve shot him. And that was it's incredible that their friendship still lasted past that. It kind of shows the kind of person Herbert was, but also the kind of connection they had early on that kind of kept that bond strong. And another part that really surprised me was Herbert's ability to take his crutches and go out and kind of face his fears at such a young age. He was able to take control of his emotions, and because hunting was something that was so important in his life, he was able to overcome that fear, which was great. And Steve also provided as scaffolding for Herbert throughout his life. He was someone there he could talk to, he would support, and it's truly a lucky thing to have. I don't know too many people who have had friends for 60 years plus. So I can only imagine the benefits having Steve, even though there were the little gaps in years where Steve went off and started his family, but they still are connected today, which is amazing, truly. And Vosky's scaffolding really came into play here, I feel like, when not deciding, but the effect it played on his life. And there's correlations between having solid friendships when you get older as well. Having friends that are there for you and hold similar health values and interests builds your health as well. If you were to gain weight, it's proven that they would also gain weight as well. They kind of you're connected, and they share that connection together as they got older. They kind of hold the same health status, whereas they're both still active. Herbert is one of the most active people I know. He goes out daily for walks with his two dogs. They're beautiful dogs. And he just stays active. He still loves nature. He still tries to get out there as much as possible, even though old age has kind of taken an effect on his body and health, but he still can't get enough of nature. And when he said that his favorite place was Maine, he actually owns a place in Maine. He lives in Cape Cod during the winter, and then once spring hits and you get into that summer season, he drives up to Maine. And he doesn't stay in Maine during the winter because he needs help with when it gets like slippery and icy. He can't really shovel and take care of himself. So having Linda, his girlfriend, who stays in Cape Cod for most of the time, there to help him, they kind of make a great bond. And that bond is also something that I notice as in when you get to Erickson's idea of intimacy versus isolation. Herbert is truly a loving person. I don't believe he would get divorced from any of his wives, from what I've met from him. It was kind of a against his will kind of thing. But he truly believes in the idea of intimacy, and he wants to share his life with another person, which is a great quality as well. And you could see it also when he was younger, and he had those choice between two women, and he picked the other one because the other one was a liar, and kind of you couldn't trust her. And when you're trying to develop this intimacy versus isolation, it's hard when you can't really trust a person. He wants someone who he can share his life with, start a family, have kids, and raise them together and share their bad and their good, and keep them tight together and keep a tight relationship, which he's able to do with his second wife, was 25 years. Him and Linda, they're actually his old wife for 25 years, Linda, and his current girlfriend is Linda as well. And they're still going strong. I think they're almost at 25 years together. So he's spent his life with, for the most part, his two wives and Linda, his girlfriend Linda, not his ex-wife Linda. And it shows that his commitment, he really believes and feels strongly that having a good relationship will bring happiness into his life. And you saw that with his family as well, when he talked about how, even though times were tough financially, him and his ex-wife Linda kept together and stayed strong. They lasted 25 years through the tough and the bad. I think he really truly appreciates having a woman who he can do that with. And I think it's also a value that I find that I would like as well. I mean, the bachelor life and just going out and partying and drinking, it's never been my thing. And I think I truly connected with that with Herbert, because I feel like we share the same values, where I value a long-term relationship over a bunch of minor relationships far more. And also, when I was talking to Herbert and asking him about what an adult is, I truly honed in on that, because as I'm starting to get older, and I'm gonna finish school eventually. I mean, there's no way, it's not soon, but in retrospect to life, it is fairly soon that I'm going to graduate. And being an adult, I want to start a family. I want to share that life with someone else. So I want to know kind of how he felt about being an adult. And really, my conclusion is that there really isn't a time when you're an adult. Well, there is, and there's not. You're always learning. It's something that will never stop throughout your entire life. I know Herbert, and this kind of gets to the idea of dementia and keeping your brain started. He reads books constantly. He reads books and books and books, kind of keeping his mind very strong, which I think is why nothing has taken effect or will take effect for his mind. His mind is incredible, really. He was able to bring back those facts. He took a second to remember them, but still the fact that he could remember them in such great detail was incredible. So reading also branches onto that. But he also said that when you're able to take the advice of someone who's older and more experienced and use that advice, you kind of get the general idea of becoming an adult. And I think, for me at least, I don't listen to anybody. If someone tells me how to do something, I'm more inclined to do something, which makes me really feel like I'm not there. I'm still young and I'm still growing, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing either. I think that I will get there eventually, and I also feel that learning through trial and error is a great thing as well. But I do believe at some point I will start to value what other people say more, and I will take into consideration more than I do now, because now I don't really take consideration for that, and I should really, because it's led to. But I learned on those mistakes. But also another so the intimacy and isolation was one of Erikson's adulthood stages, but also I honed it on the generativity versus stagnation, the idea of being helpful to younger generations or older generations, kind of the idea of caretaking versus being kind of just stagnant and not really providing any kind of service or helping the society and community in any way. Herbert does that. I know a woman who lives in Maine. I haven't met her yet, but I hear stories about her all the time where she comes to his house all the time, and it's rough guidance. It's very rough, but it's still guidance in a way. He will help her if she needs it in any way he possibly can. I mean, there's not much he can do physically, but kind of as a person to go to talk to, and as a person who can give guidance to the younger generations, it's a phenomenal thing to have. And also, when he was younger, he had Linda, his current girlfriend's Aunt Billy, and she was older, and he would take care of her as well as going to work and kind of supporting family and her and it never really seemed to take effect from the stories I heard. He welcomed it. He welcomed the idea of helping another person, which I think he carried on throughout his entire life, where he would help anyone if needed. But also, on the reverse, he didn't really accept help willingly. He was very he was very he was very unattracted to the idea of taking help from others. I know a story where he needed oil for his family, and so he went to those companies who will give you oil depending on your financial status and help you get there. And he said, when you got there, I'll pay you back, I promise. And they said, no, you don't have to. This is kind of us trying to help out for the people in need. And he said, no. And matter of fact, once he got a job, a couple months later, he went there and gave them the money back for the oil that he had taken. It shows definitely the difference in generations here, whereas I feel like a lot of people from our generations will take help when really they don't need it, and then still kind of feel entitled to more. And people are very entitled, I feel, in our generation, which was something I honed in on, was the idea that his generation is not less entitled, but they will work harder for what they want. His generation is very much about making money and staying afloat than less being happy. It just happened that he was happy building things and working on ships and on diesel engines. He was a very active person, which also came to the idea of John Holland and his happy at work kind of diagram. And I really saw that Herbert was part of the realistic, where they find enjoyment from working with their hands and building, being able to see productivity and being able to see the results of their work. But that's less for this generation, where this generation has the idea, but they're more inclined to be happy. He would work doing anything if he could, just so he could keep his family afloat. And I feel like some people in our generation definitely do that as well. It's definitely not, I'm not saying that it's absent from our generation, but I feel it's more of a character trait from his generation. And also the idea that he isn't subjugated to destructive protectiveness that people kind of stereotype onto other people, the ageism stereotype, where they feel that they need to help the elderly because they're helpless and they can't do anything, so they'll keep them inside trapped, and they shouldn't go outside. They should stay at home where they're less likely to break a hip or fall and trip, and just absurd ideas that they think that once you reach above 65, you're incapable of living. Herbert is, like I said, the complete opposite. He will go outside, take the dogs out, drive up to Maine. He loves to walk as far as he can. And that also is something that he passed on to his children, which was one of the ideas of parents passing on traits that they have to their children. And one of the things is definitely a love of nature. I know Kendra, this was a new thing to me when we first started dating, was the idea of going for walks before dinner and after dinner. My family, I wasn't raised that way. Mine was come have dinner and then go to bed or take a nap, not go for walks and kind of enjoy the nature. Was never part of my family's values. We like sports. We like being outside, but we have more of a competitive edge where we like to play sports, we like to play games, and we like to kind of compete against each other, and that works for my family. So the idea of walking after dinner was definitely a shock to me. I wasn't really prepared for that, especially for Christmas dinner. When I first experienced this idea, was that they walked before Christmas dinner to kind of get their appetites running, and then after dinner to kind of work off the food. But also they connect through that, and that's something their values share. The mom and dad, their mom Linda and their dad Herbert, they share a love of nature, and that kind of keeps them close. When Herbert said they had no money and they walked millions of miles, that was true. They were relatively poor, and I definitely know from my aspect that my family wasn't the most well-off family, but we found our escape from that through sports or watching TV. I know it's kind of our generation where we just kind of watch TV and sit on our ass all day. But my mom also encouraged something that's new, I guess, that's kind of forgotten for the more recent, the I generation, that you kind of spend the entire day outside and you don't sit inside and watch TV. When I was a kid, it was get out of the house, you're not allowed to stay in here, and don't come back until dinner's ready or when it gets dark out. And that's something I think Herbert's generation shared when he talked about elementary school. He was happier hanging out with a bunch of friends and going to the woods and having a bonfire. And at such a young age, it's not seen today. Most kids at that age aren't going to the woods and starting bonfires. They're kind of like sitting around on their Xbox, talking to their friends online with no kind of physical interaction. And I think that also builds upon his character. He is the person he is because he doesn't rely on cell phones and Xbox Live to talk to people. He actually goes out and talks to people face to face, and it makes more of a connection. And I think that's something I want to work on. I feel like I text too much or I spend too much time on my phone. I know I definitely get criticized by that by Kendra. So I think I need to work on talking more. I definitely don't have a problem talking to people. I'm very chatty if you've met me outside of class. I have no problem talking to anyone. But I feel like I could do that more, or maybe make more friends and more connections throughout school, because school is definitely a great place to meet people. Also, when I talked about the history part, and this was truly amazing, the idea of knowing John F. Kennedy, the president, the famous president, that really I have no connection to anyone that's famous, or especially on the level of a president who will be known throughout history. It won't be some like superstar who fades eventually. John F. Kennedy, the John F. Kennedy. I mean, there's no way around that. He will be around, and him to know on a personal level his wife and his kids